Artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference sheets are all available on my Patreon.
Hey there guys and girls, I hope you're doing well. My name's Mikey, welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial. And today we're going to be taking a look at how to draw your own anime and manga characters down low in a squatting position. We're going to use some basic shapes to put this together, just enough that it's going to look correct without being overly complicated. But because this is essentially structuring anatomy, this is also going to be useful for any forms of life study or general illustration. So I'm just going to go ahead and get cracking with a spare piece of paper to rest my hand on and a super cheap disposable mechanical pencil. I'm just using printer paper here with a number of sheets. And the very first thing that I just want to talk through is going to be weight. That is, when you've got a character who's squatting down low, their body weight is essentially going to be sitting down through the headline. And if they're resting down on the back of their heels, that's going to go all the way down to the feet. So I'm just doing a very vague rough line here. I'm going to essentially start working a lot more firmly than I usually do. And I'm going to try to keep things relatively quick, but it does mean they might come out relatively rough as well. And we're going to start off with a character where we're looking just a little bit behind, because I just want to show you how I think about that body weight. Now, this is going to be essentially part one, perhaps, of a two-part tutorial series where we talk about squatting characters. In this example, I'm going to be keeping the knees together, the legs essentially closed in low squats and kneeling positions, just so that everything is relatively safe for work feeling. And we'll take a look at wider splits and what's going on with the anatomy on the inside of the thighs and so on in another tutorial further down the line. Not to mention as well, we've already covered a in-depth how to draw legs tutorial where we actually go over the musculature and the structure of what's going on around the legs, especially how to break things down and keep it simple for the knees of your characters. That's available probably with a little pop-up in the corner of your screen there. So I'm going to assume that you know a little bit of that, just so that we can break down the rest of what's going on into hopefully a relatively easy process. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to think about the curve of the spine and sweep a little bit in just here as I come down from our neckline, and then I'm going to pop out relatively generously as we go into the lower part of the torso. And I'm still using some very quick, simple, basic building blocks for this as we look just behind this character's shoulder line. Again, when it comes to the building blocks of torsos and how to break down how to draw bodies in nice, big, simple shapes, we've covered all of this before in a whole load of tutorials, playlist hopefully available somewhere on the right. And of course, everything that we do here today, I will make a copy of everything we draw available over for the patrons on Patreon, where you can get the entire pack of all the references for just $1. So here I've got a very basic back situation. I might imagine that we've got a bit of bum curve going down around about here into this part of the hip bucket area, and that the middle of the spine, I'm just going to adjust that to go a little bit further up there, and then a shoulder line that's going to be popping one circle off around about there. This shoulder circle is going to be sitting a bit more forward somewhere over here. I'm going to be focusing really around the legs, hips, all the way down to the feet, because that's the area that's doing some very interesting things when we draw our characters squatting down, especially if you're trying to maybe depict an anime or manga character who is out on the dance floor, or maybe with a partner doing something more private in a bedroom, and they're really just bringing all of that business all right down and low on the whole situation. So let's just kind of work out what's going there. I'm just going to get some very basic arms out the way as well. I go down to around about the bottom of the chest sphere that we're kind of working on, that elliptical shape to bring it all together. But I just want to focus on these legs. Now I've got this weight line now that goes down the middle of this character, and I want that weight to sit on the back of the heels. So I'm going to imagine that we've got a very vague circle here for one of the feet. The heel part of that might just be sectioned off loosely here. Again, I'm working a little bit more firmly than I usually do. Usually I'd work very lightly when it comes to these slightly more interesting poses, because we like to explore with some test lines all over the place, and then you can firm up the ones that seem to be working, get rid of the ones that don't seem to be doing a job. I'm also just going to show here the side of the bucket of the hips as we come down there, just slowly building up and adding to the definition of these shapes. There we go. And with this foot here, I'm just going to come down and imagine that it's balancing on the toes on the front. So although we might have this large, generous, vaguely triangular shape that comes down here, it's actually just going to pop at about 90 degrees as we've got the toe section going off there. This isn't a how to draw feet tutorial, which is my excuse for saying this will not be perfect, but hopefully it's going to be just right enough to give you an idea of what's going on. So I've got that weight resting down on that foot, haven't even worried about the legs yet. I'm going to go ahead and just get another one right about here as well, coming down on that edge. Let's just make that the under part of the heel. Now, whether you're drawing shoes or this is going to be bare feet, use these building blocks as a starting point and you can build up from there to see what you like. And now if I imagine that, right, we've got our level character, level shoulders, there's not much contrapposto going on, they've got level hips as well, and the joint's going to come out of this kind of bucket hip area and pop out for the legs. Now, depending on how you kind of measure out the legs for your character and so on, I just like to make sure that the entire leg section is going to be at least about the entire body section. So I might just imagine that halfway we'll take things from about the middle of the hip and we'll work our way down and around. So half of this distance going up here might be how far I'm going to pop out here, but I'm going to foreshorten it a little bit. I'm going to go about this far out, and then I'm going to just take it easy from there because we're going to block everything back. And I've got a straight line here to indicate the direction of the leg. And I usually drop a circle right on the end for that to be our kneecap. But when legs bend, and again, do check out my how to draw strong legs tutorial, we talk all about this, things start to move around. So my kneecap circle is actually going to be around about here. I've gone lower. And then when I come and follow a line back to this part of the leg, I'm coming off the bottom of that circle line, instead of meeting both of them perfectly in the middle. Now, I'm still thinking about a big, generous, cylindrical shape that's going to be the top part of the legs and the thighs and so on. But I'm going to squeeze it a little bit as well, so that it's starting to flatten out. So let's start off with a big cylinder that's coming forward here, just a guideline, simple basic shape that's going out over the calf muscles quite nicely before sweeping down, depending on how generous you're making your characters. I might just come in a little bit lower, in fact. And again, don't be scared to have loads of test lines until you find out what you do and don't like. Don't be overly beholden to any of your initial guides. They're here to help you, not here to hinder you or lock you into place. I'm going to sweep down towards that knee area and then just generously curve out because it's a cylinder, remember? And then I might just have a line that's just a guide, very lightly coming up there because we're going to change that shape in just a moment. Then in a very similar way, okay, let's come up from here. We've got the hard shin bone. It should take us to the bottom of this circle, round about there. But actually, I'm going to imagine that the calf muscle, which we often draw as a kind of teardrop coming down, well, this is getting really squeezed now. So I'm going to draw this kind of big, squeezing, slightly eggish lump around about here, just like so. And I'm not coming all the way down the leg. I'm just bringing it to around about there. And I'm going to now imagine that, okay, because this part of the muscle is popping up and squeezing here, we're following this line to show how these two sections of the leg interact as they meet back on each other. And then maybe that's going to squeeze down and the top part of the leg that sits on top is going to cover a bit more of this area, especially as the bum sinks down over the back of that foot. So I've got a curve here where I'm actually bumping up into that area to represent that section of the calf. And then I can just firm my way up along this line here. And you'll notice I'm rotating my hand all the way around the place if it helps to give me a gentler, better curving line that I'm enjoying a bit more to get a smooth flow of things. And then as we go up to the knee here, you can kind of imagine, because of the way the muscles are bulging, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, on the side of the knee, I'm actually just imagining a faint squeeze there, and then the kneecap almost separately with its own series of ligaments and bits and interesting shapes that are going on, is then popping out beyond that with a slightly flatter tip, just like so. So I might not draw this line shape here, depending on how I'm shading, but I'm going to certainly show that things are projecting out past there, just like that. And in terms of this torso and top area, well, we've covered that a lot before. I will come in on a little bit of time lapse and clean all of that up in just a moment. But let's focus on what's going on down here. This is where the action seems to be. We've got then the rest of our bum area here. I'm going to sweep round for the other cheek, which is a bit like a golden ratio. We start off shallow and then we get that curve going tighter and tighter before we squeeze into the underside of the bum, just like so. And then again down onto those feet or heels, or depending what's going on with shoes or barefoot. So that's what I'm imagining here. Just imagine that that's squeezing away from us, just like so, and the musculature is squeezing out the side. So I'm just putting this little surface line to show that there's a second bit of extra bump there, and then squeezing out on that calf muscle there before we aim back down towards the shin line. So that's what's going on in terms of how I like to think about the weight. I like to actually go right through the spine line and then sink things right over the feet if this character is putting all of their body weight down on the feet accordingly. And let's take a look at a slightly more sort of front and open angle. And this is where we're kind of going to enter into the territory where we're using these basic shapes, but also working around these forms and trying to get these nice organic squeezes and squishy feelings in certain areas. But hopefully we can break that down. I'm going to start off with a line then for the hips. Let's go across here, like so. And then if you imagine that this is my hip line, I've just got that kind of elliptical shape on its side that helps me very loosely guide out what's going to be the bucket area of the hips themselves. Again, I'm trying to go quick and firmly. Also, guys, whilst we are putting this together, thank you so much as ever for subscribing to the channel. I said we'd do this a while ago. We certainly will be. I'm going to do a proper thank you video for over 1 million subscribers. It's absolutely amazing and I really do appreciate it. And I do just love the fact that you guys are trying to get into drawing. Now we're doing closed leg squatting positions today. I will do a further video on wide leg stuff, which is a little bit less salubrious, but this is just going to be nice and family friendly for the moment. But yeah, I'm not afraid to use boobs to try to convince you guys to get into drawing because I find it very therapeutic. It can take your mind off of life struggles. You don't have to love it, but I do want you to try it because you might really like it. So there you go. Thank you very much for following along. Now, I'm just going to imagine, right, I've got the bone of the hip here, and I'm going to bring this a little bit further out on this side as well. And then the front center line might be just the lower part of the abdominal wall. We've got a little bit of front tummy there. Maybe we've got the belly button somewhere in this cross zone. And then I'm just going to come out and sweep down before popping down to the bottom part of the torso and privates there. And then I'm just going to sweep in just that V arc that we like to do. And again, this is all just part of my guide to help me in just a moment, where I come down here and inversely with a more concave line, pop up over on this side as well. So these are our bony areas of the hips here, which aren't going to flex. Just up here and just over here. Everything else might be squishing around and having a lot more fun. So if I want to kind of work out how to evenly keep things going, I've got my line that's going right across here, and I'm going to keep things at that lateral feeling. So I might have my legs popping out right over to here with the knees sticking out accordingly, but that line is still parallel to this one. And I could just draw a little box shape to help guide how I'm just filling in that particular zone. But remember, everything's going to come back right down on this center line of weight. So I know that I'm going to be popping the feet somewhere vaguely around about here. And I'm just going to put a little box to be the back parts of the feet, just like we've got here. And maybe just something that might indicate where the toes are going. This is just a very loose guide to help me. I might put these feet a little further apart. But let's see what's going on here. I'm going to pop all the way out from this joint. And I'm going to imagine a nice round circle to be our kneecap area here. So I'm just popping this here to help guide what I'm going to connect later, being very generous with the size of that circle. And actually, let me just firm that up for you a little bit further. And then a very similar thing over here. Let's imagine this leg's popping out on that side. Just going to get a nice generous guide circle. I'm going to bring my hand just a touch further down the length of the pencil there, just so we've got that in place a tiny bit more accurately. whenever I sketch very loosely, I put my hand quite far back up this pencil to loosely guide around, and then I try to bring it back down and in when we're cracking on. And now again, I'm going to think firstly just about those squashed cylinders. Let's imagine that we start off around about here where the knee is. There's a kind of circular shape at the end of that cylinder, and I'm going to just curve and sweep that up and around and down towards where we meet back in over here to what might be a hip flexor around about this point. And I'm going to get very generous around the outside edge, because now this cylinder is describing the squeeze outward of all of the thigh muscle as it leads its way around to the side of the bum. So even though we've got this shape coming down here in the hip guide, the cylinder might sweep all the way around here. And I'm being a bit more straight with this curve, a bit more shallow as it curves around, and then coming a little bit thicker and deeper, and then back up as we reach our way around the bottom part, just like so. And from where it tucks right into the body here, I'm just going to imagine, okay, let's get a little surface line to help describe where that part is leg before it gets into hip and meets around the side of the bottom. And then I'm going to do a similar thing over here. We're a little bit more side on to the inside edge of this one. But I'm still going to keep the shapes relatively the same. That is, cylinder is a little bit smaller at this end, and it's a little bit larger as it meets in this end, and it's not a perfect circle, getting flattened into an ellipse. And as it meets into the body here, this is probably going to just curve here on this side in before it starts to go down. And then, just like I've got here, let's sweep nice and generously up and around like so. We're meeting towards this knee circle joint, but we're going to talk about that in just a quick sec. Up, down, and around. And then in a very similar way, I'm going not down too far, relatively levelly in. And this is as a guide because, again, we're going to squeeze things around in just a moment. So there's those both legs going forwards. Now let's get down on the underside. Now, when it comes to the calf muscles as they squeeze in, these guys squeeze right out. And what I actually think of doing as we make our way back towards the legs there is I'm just going to travel back a little bit in this direction underneath this leg, because we're looking at a 3/4 view on top of things. And I'm just going to actually start to draw an ellipse right around under here, very shallow, just like so, like this. Getting that shape in there. That's going to help me map around all this squeeze. I'm going to do the similar thing here. I'm coming back in towards the body from underneath the circle, but I'm already thinking about this elliptical squeeze shape, just like so. Okay, slowly getting there. And then this is going to follow back again to the back of the foot. So this heel might all be hidden away from us as this leg's down here. You can see already I'm building past my guidelines, which is absolutely fine. As long as it feels overall it's okay with its mass and its weight, you're going to be just fine. And then I'm going to come down and just put a foot that's heading straight downish like so. And then I'm just going to imagine we've got a little part of that section that's a sort of big toe around about here. The rest of it's coming in over there. Again, I'll just decide exactly how much I want to work around that when I drop into some time lapse. And then this leg as well is still coming back in and under here. I'm curving that back through. I'm still imagining that just like we had up here and up here, there's a separate line popping back down through there. But I'm not drawing it in because it's going to over confuse what's going on with our line work. And because it's a lot of organic shapes which are squishing at the moment, we can get away with just squishing out this calf before we make our way right back down past here, get the other foot in. So I'm going to go back down around about here and imagine again that foot's coming out around about there. And it might come out in the form of one big toe separated with all of the smaller ones into a foot that's a paddle shape going up there. Slightly better version of what I've just been doing on this side. So let's just clean that up very quickly. Just like so. And then pop back down again with that guide. Let's get back in under there. Excuse me. And get a nice front toe area, a bit more confidently there. Just these larger shapes that we'll work with and expand out from. So what's going on with the knees? Because this is the area that usually catches people out, and it certainly did me. I'm imagining the kneecap still as a hinge more than a sphere. So I might be imagining a shape that's popping out here, but isn't as wide and thick as that circle. Just a little semicircle hinge shape there, and then a similar one here, a semicircle hinge, a little bit shallower shape here. And this is the main mass of the knee, which is protruding out from us. The rest is going to sweep down here and meet into the underside as it curves back in. And the muscles of the leg are coming down and then slightly flattening out just before they meet into there, because they're kind of building into the top part of the joint, not right over the tip. And the bit that I just want to have a quick look at is that squish. We've got this calf muscle here squishing outwards. Okay, great. Let's remember that this part is going to be all part of our squish line as it comes out and around. It sticks out here, and it also bulges up around here on the top part of the leg. Remember, this is creating an extra bit of squeeze here and an extra bit of squeeze there that normally wouldn't be in place when you're standing up with your character. And in a similar vein over here, I'm just going to come up to around about here on the inside of the leg, not putting all of that outside calf muscle in. I'm meeting this one a bit more halfway. We're still, getting this extra internal squish of all the muscle here and this extra squish off the calf as they're pressing with all that body weight onto each other. But this part of the leg is going to go down here and even there. And then again, just imagine that squish is bulging here and bulging there. And everything else is going a bit more flatly over top to come down there. And the rest sweeps under. So there we've got that line. And over here, very loosely, describe our calf line here. Squish, squish, and then back under. Nothing too crazy. I'm just going to get that bulge to just pop out a little bit before I sweep into that straight line. But everything's disappearing away as it goes underneath the leg, down towards the ankle, and then maybe a little bit more heel popping off outside the back there. Then in terms of just tidying this up, let's get some slight abdominal wall here before we go down into the privates at the front. Similar thing, just down that side. We've got that hard area of the hip here. And here we've done very specifically good hips and bum tutorials on how to draw hips and torsos before. It's all there in my big tutorials playlist. But now we've got these legs popping through, and the lines that I'm still thinking about is this, curving over to this, popping out a bit more straightly and flattening at the end here before it sinks back in and under, curves around into that line back to the foot where the body weight is going to be. And then in this inside edge, we've got the hip flexor where it meets, curving out over the top, popping out of the knee joint. It squeezes a little bit more forward. Just check that other leg tutorial, and then back in as we go back around. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to drop into a little bit of time lapse. I'm going to tidy up these lines because there is a lot of construction here, just to kind of clarify exactly what's going on. And I'm going to just give you a very quick example of a squatting pose from the front, and maybe a couple more when a character's leaning a bit further back. All the knees are going to be together, so don't worry. It's kind of upskirtish, but nothing too lewd. And also, just going to focus on a really simple version here. Keep an eye on how I just start from the hips, draw the knees in place, and then build out everything from there. Okay, guys, I'll see you in just a sec. Hey there guys, and welcome back. So yeah, hopefully during the time lapse that's given you a bit of an idea of how I'm constructing through this process. When we've got a character who's squatting down and there's all sorts of squeeze happening, sure, you can take some time and try to very loosely sketch out from your building blocks the correct anatomy for everything, with a lot of very light strokes which help you explore what you're going to end up keeping and what you're going to get rid of. Obviously, we'd completely clean this up if we were going to take this any further. I've got the hinge joint feeling for the knees, which when the legs are completely bent, are going to be halfway between the top point and the bottom. That's why with stuff over here, I actually put that guideline circle down below the top leg and above the bottom one, just so that we can see that everything squeezes and protrudes. I also just shaved a little bit off the end here to flatten out that shape to show that joint. Obviously, we don't have to go too firmly like that, but if you want to try to get it feeling right, remember that the flesh on either side of the leg is going to squish right at the top here and right down at the calf. And on the inside edge, you get some interesting kind of up and down shape line here going on. And on the outside, don't worry too much. You can just focus on the bulge of the calf cutting up and into the otherwise guide-shaped cylinder of the top part of the leg. Then I just wanted to show things from the front. This is obviously one of the most common, slightly upskirtish kind of shots that you might get. With this character, their weight is still mostly on their feet. And as we look up, you can see that I just started things off with these circles for the knees, worked out that the area for the feet and the heel is going to be sitting underneath the bum part of the hip, and then just joined them together. And I'm still thinking about these teardrop shapes for the calf muscle that comes out from the knee, but you'll notice I've squeezed them out quite generously to show how they're getting flattened against the other part of the leg. And also, we've still got some space for the inside of the privates and the center of the hips here, as this thigh shape, I've actually, if you can see on this guideline, gone a little bit convex there, swept in before I've swept back out and around to join it up, and then loads of generous extra curves on the outside to actually catch the rest of the bum where it all joins into the hips. And also, very similar example where I've really broken that down basically. This example, this character's now tilted even further back. Their body weight might be resting a bit more on their bum, might be that they've got their hands behind them, the legs splayed a little bit further out. And again, we can now just see that, okay, it's still basically the guide blocks, starting with the hip line, joining things up to a big generous knee circle and down to the feet. And then I'm just thinking of these big sweeping cylindrical shapes at the front for the underside of the back of the leg. Then these big cylindrical shapes going round, these big curving ones for the underside of the bottom area. And again, squeezing out those teardrop shapes as we come down away from the knee for the squeeze of the calf before they straighten out towards the bottom of the leg and go down to our rather basic feet. And a similar example here, where we've just got things popping towards us, but the knees are popping a little bit further up, the feet are a bit more splayed, and we're kind of trying to do things at an angle. Again, I'm kind of jutting a little bit too firmly perhaps over the top of this kneecap just over here. I might want to just slowly squeeze that edge back down a little bit, but otherwise that is what you want to be thinking about when it comes to getting those characters in those squatting positions. Like I mentioned, we're going to look at some more examples where we've got wide splayed leg squats and splits and so on, and the interesting things with the anatomy. So make sure you subscribe to catch all of that. And of course, you've been seeing delicious names on screen. Those are my lovely patrons on Patreon. Because if you want to grab a copy of this worksheet, I'll scan it in and add it to my entire pack, which you can grab for just $1 on Patreon. Links, of course, below. And that's how I'm able to keep making free drawing tutorials on YouTube. I just want you guys to give drawing a try, but it's thanks to those patrons who pick up the pack that makes all of this actually possible for me. So much love to all of you guys. Let me know what we're going to be drawing next time in the comments below, and I'll see you then. Take care.